Hi, thank you so much for joining me at Microsoft Research Summit 2021. My name is Lucas Joppa. I'm the Chief Environmental Officer at Microsoft. And today we're joined together in a section looking at research for a net zero carbon economy. The title of my talk is Building a Net Zero Future Together. And I think that last word is really the most important word in the talk, together. Because when we think about what the best available climate science says the world needs to do to avoid the worst social and economic impacts of a rapidly changing climate, what we need to do is simply incredible. We have to transition our global economy and our global society to a fundamentally different way of doing business, a fundamentally different relationship between people and the planet, a relationship that takes all of the social and economic activities on Earth and ensures that at the end of the day, there's net zero carbon accumulating in our Earth's atmosphere. And that, in large part, is my job at Microsoft. I actually joined Microsoft inside Microsoft Research as a scientist working at the intersection of environmental and computer science. I spent many wonderful years inside Microsoft Research with all of my research colleagues before taking a more corporate role as Microsoft's first Chief Environmental Officer to ensure that the research that Microsoft is doing, that the research that the broader academic community is doing, is all informing the work that Microsoft knows must be done, and that we're putting that work into practice to build a better future together. And when we think about Microsoft's worldview here, it's pretty straightforward. You don't need to have taken more than maybe, your first day of your first semester of your first logic class to understand that Microsoft operates at such a scale with so many customers in so many countries around the world that we are so strongly embedded in our global economy that it's just a simple fact that for Microsoft to do well, we need the world to do well. That's the scale at which we operate. So goes the world, or as goes the world, so goes Microsoft, which gives us a pretty significant vested interest in the climate issue of the day. Because what's becoming clear is that unless the world gets out ahead of our rapidly unfolding climate catastrophe and begins to stabilize our climate systems, then the world won't do well. And that logical sequence from Microsoft to the world and the world to climate is pretty clear. And so we have a fundamental philosophy about our business and a purpose of our business. And it's really to pursue profit through solving problems of people and the planet. And what I think is interesting about that is that it's not necessarily true that all of people's problems become problems of the planet. But it is almost inevitably true that any problem of the planet will become problems for people. And that's because our planet, obviously, our home, is the source of all of the natural resources that serve as the foundation for our global economy. And so for Microsoft, it's critically important that we manage this resource for the betterment of our business, for the betterment of our customers' businesses, and for the betterment of the societies and economies that we do business within. And so the reason that we're really talking about research for carbon removal and research for a carbon negative outcome is really because of some conversations that happened inside the company about a year and a half ago. And at the highest levels of Microsoft, there were questions about sustainability and questions about climate. And those questions went something like this. They were very simple. Are we doing enough when it comes to sustainability and climate? And I think that the answer to that for any self-aware organization in 2021 or back then in late 2019, early 2020 was obviously no. There's no way that any organization, I believe, can sit back and say, everything that we're doing is perfect and we're doing enough on this topic. If that were true, the world wouldn't be in the situation that it is. The second question, once we had asked and answered, are we doing enough, with a resounding no, the second question was, well, does it matter if we do anything? This is a collective action problem. And so if any particular organization acts and no other organizations act, then it all seems kind of meaningless, which is potentially true, particularly if you're a pessimist. But if you have a bias for action, which is what we hope to have, what we strive to have inside Microsoft, is a bias for action, then you appreciate the fact that nobody will ever do anything without those first movers. And at Microsoft, we have this perspective that those that have more should do more. And so we decided that, yes, one organization could have an impact, particularly if it leaned into its core corporate competencies and used what made it as an organization special to tackle this most existential of problems for our species. And so then the third question was, well, if we're not doing enough and one organization can make a difference, then what should we do? And that was a really significant moment for Microsoft on our sustainability journey. We stepped back and we asked ourselves, what should we do in this space to maximize our impact and to center everything that we do on our core competencies? And so we decided to come up with an ambition, a vision. It was to be, and it is to be, the leading platform provider of technology solutions to environmental challenges. And so to be clear, we're not saying that technology is the silver bullet to solve all of the world's environmental challenges. It's just that that's what we think we do well, that we do best is platform technologies, and we want to bring that to the solution space. And so we decided then to focus on 4 key areas: carbon, water, waste, and ecosystems, and to set industry-leading commitments in each of those, and to support each of those with 5 pillars of our operations, ensuring that the way that our products and facilities are sourced, manufactured, operated, and then managed at end of life, that we're doing that as sustainably as possible in accordance with the best available science. And that's really what a lot of people think of as core corporate sustainability. But we wanted to quickly go beyond that, to say that that's a necessary but insufficient criterion for success, and to say that we want to make sure that our existing products and services are being deployed in pursuit of sustainability outcomes, and that we're innovating new products and services in this space as well, so that we become the preferred partner for customers all around the world as they look towards going down their own sustainability transition pathway as well. That we're vocal about policy advocacy and leveling the playing field so that all organizations have to go down this journey together, and that we put our employees to work and ensure that sustainability is a part of every employee's job. And what we did then is we basically took a page out of an engineering playbook here at Microsoft, and we said, we're going to have 4 sustainability sprints, 1 quarter, 1 sprint, 1 topic. Start with carbon, go to water, waste, and ecosystems, and set industry-leading commitments aligned with the best available science in each of those. And so that's what we did. Over the course of the year, we came up with a succinct set of commitments to be a carbon negative, water positive, zero waste company, all by 2030, while also protecting more land than we use and building a new computing platform that we're calling a planetary computer to better monitor, model, and ultimately manage Earth's natural systems. And I could basically give an entire talk about each of these commitments that we've made, or just even one aspect of those commitments. But because we're talking about research for a carbon negative future, research for carbon removal, I want to focus on our carbon negative commitment and what that commitment entails, which is that by 2030, Microsoft will have reduced its emissions by half or more, and then removed the rest, physically removed the rest of those emissions from the atmosphere. And we will do that year on year from 2030 moving forward. And we won't just stop on zeroing out our emissions every year. We will also, from the year 2030 to 2050, work to physically remove from the atmosphere all of the emissions we're associated with having produced since we were founded in 1975. And there's a few specifics that I want to get into on this commitment, because it really requires just a little bit of high-level understanding of the way that people talk about carbon accounting. They talk about Scope 1 emissions, Scope 2 emissions, and Scope 3 emissions. Scope 1 emissions are those emissions you are directly responsible for. Maybe the diesel generators in our data center campuses, or the natural gas that we use in our kitchens here at Microsoft. Our total Scope 1 emissions are pretty small, only about 100,000 tons per year. Then there are Scope 2 emissions, emissions associated with the generation of the energy, the electricity that you consume at any given time. As a large cloud provider, a large cloud platform provider, that's actually pretty significant for Microsoft. The energy we consume is responsible for emitting about 4 million metric tons of CO2 every year. And then there's what's called Scope 3 emissions. And these are all the emissions from your supply chain and your downstream value chain, things like product use phases from customers. And that indirect emissions portfolio is, for most organizations, the most significantly dense aspect of the emissions portfolio. For Microsoft, that's about 12 million metric tons of emissions every year, which across Scope 1, 2, and 3 add up to about 16 million metric tons. And so what we are looking to do is to reduce those emissions, as I said, by half or more, and physically remove the rest. And so we have a high-level plan. If you like charts, here it is, that just shows us reducing our emissions and removing the rest and getting to zero by 2030. Now that's pretty simple to say, but it's very complicated to do. The way that we will reduce our Scope 1 emissions will be to do things like completely electrify our global campus vehicle fleet, to switch all of our generators on our campuses away from diesel fuel, and other investments like that. But as I said, there's only about 100,000 tons to reduce there, so we should get that close to zero. For our electricity that we consume as a large cloud platform provider, we'll purchase 100% renewable energy by 2025. And then by 2030, we will not just have ensured that all of our energy is matched by renewable energy, but we will ensure that 100% of the electrons being generated, 100% of the time, are matched in place and time. So within the same hour of our consumption of an electron, we will match a renewable electron back onto the grid. And that is really intended to help send a signal about the need for technology innovations in energy storage and backup energy systems. And then for Scope 3, we'll be working with suppliers and we'll be removing emissions. And what's so difficult and so interesting about Scope 3 emissions is that you have such indirect control. And so for us, we are starting simple by instituting a new emissions component to our supplier code of conduct. This is the contract that covers all of our suppliers and our engagements with our suppliers across our entire company. And we're requiring all suppliers to begin with recording and reporting their own emissions, whether that's through popular third-party reporting platforms that they can then share with us, or directly into Microsoft's own reporting platform. We're also incentivizing this supplier reduction with an internal carbon fee that helps us apply the cost of carbon from any supplier decision we make directly into the contract that we are cutting with that supplier. And the way that this works is through an internal carbon fee that we have inside Microsoft. At the minute, it's $15 per metric ton. A lot of people ask why that's so little compared to much higher proposed government prices on carbon. And the point is because we are trying to incentivize behavior change within our businesses in advance of those significant governmental fees coming on. And so we want the price per metric ton of our carbon fee to be as much as, but no more, as is needed to drive our carbon emissions reduction as far down as possible. And this fee covers our Scope 1, our Scope 2, and our Scope 3 emissions. And it is used, as I said, to drive behavior change, but also to raise revenue for carbon removal procurement that we'll talk about in a minute. The second financial vehicle that we have, I just talked about the fee. We also have a fund. We have a $1 billion climate innovation fund that specifically invests in carbon reduction and removal technologies. And there's 4 areas that we really look at as important to be investing in. Things that we see at the bottom of this slide. We want, of course, significant and measurable climate impact. We want to put our money where nobody else is putting their money. We want to maximize the additionality of our investments. So we look for underfunded markets that aren't supported by existing schemes. We're looking to make a difference on climate equity because we understand that there won't be a transition to net zero unless it is a just and humane transition as well. And so we need to make sure that equity issues are covered. And then as we talk about Scope 3 and our supply chain reduction, we're looking to have shared alignment with Microsoft's core businesses because we want to help mature the markets and drive down what is called the green premium, the premium price that low carbon technologies currently demand in the market. We want to drive that down to 0 or negative compared to high carbon assets or products. And so we have this fee and this fund that we use to mature the overall carbon reduction and removal space. And one of the ways that we use the fee to mature this space is through what Microsoft initiated a year or so ago, which is what became the largest carbon removal request for proposals in the history of the world. We were seeking 1 million metric tons of carbon removal in the next fiscal year. We received proposals for about 55 million metric tons, but when we looked and compared those 55 million metric tons to a set of pretty stringent prerequisites or criteria that we have, that we list at the bottom of this slide, we quickly reduced those 55 million metric tons to just 2 million metric tons that would have met our prerequisites. And then we purchased more than 1.3 of those 2 million metric tons. And so what that says is 2 things. First, there's some incredibly interesting projects out there that we're buying from today, and these markets can begin to mature. Here's a list of the first year selected projects. They cover predominantly nature-based solutions, afforestation, reforestation, soil carbon sequestration, as well as more engineering or technology-centric approaches like direct air capture, machines that suck carbon out of the atmosphere, sequester it, and then store it deep into geological formations where it mineralizes into rock, or bioenergy with carbon capture and sequestration. But what it also says is that these projects, or that this carbon removal market, is wildly immature. And so we've gone and we've begun investing in things like Climeworks, a first-of-its-kind company that does large direct air capture manufacturing facilities. And we promise to purchase from them as well as invest in their groundbreaking Orca project that this photo is showing inside or in Norway, that just had a ribbon-cutting ceremony the other week. Or Northern Lights, also in Norway, where large carbon capture sequestrations from cement processing facilities are happening so that the carbon emissions are being captured, stored, and then transported across the ocean to be able to be stored in deep geological formation and make sure that that carbon is sequestered for thousands to tens of thousands of years. There are a lot of challenges and opportunities, and that's why we're coming together today. There's a lot of challenges when it comes to natural climate solutions. In fact, how you monitor and validate the sequestration that actually happens, how you guarantee the permanence, the long-term sequestration so that, for instance, your forests don't catch on fire and end up emitting all of the carbon that you paid to sequester. There's accounting problems, and that there's a lot of research opportunities, including how you drive socioeconomic benefits, how you drive higher quality, etc. On the engineering side, things like direct air capture, there's an incredible opportunity out there to find new catalysts to more efficiently and cost-effectively capture carbon. How we drive down the price and drive up the volume of these technology-based solutions is going to be a critical research topic moving forward, because at the end of the day, across both natural climate solutions and engineered solutions, we know that demand wildly outstrips supply, but that potential wildly outstrips both demand and supply. And so as we start thinking about the overall global net zero program, it's clear that we need to be thinking about a shared definition of what we mean by net zero and carbon negative, that we have clear units of measurement for how any particular investment in net zero activities works to stabilize our climate, and that we're maturing our markets as rapidly as possible. And so with that, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to participate, to think about how your research programs and your research expertise are applicable to the topic of carbon removal and the overall global net zero program that must be built, compiled, and computed by the year 2050. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about the discussions and potential ideas that come out of this session. And with that, I want to introduce the set of keynote speakers that we have in this session. We have some incredible speakers lined up to help give you some deeper insights into different areas of expertise. And I think you'll find these keynote speakers both inspirational as well as highly educational. We have Robert Weissenmullet, who is a former California Energy Commissioner, who's joining us to speak about the nexus of climate change and energy policy. And Robert served as California Energy Commissioner from 2010 to 2019 and as chair the last 8 years. And he has a deep background in energy policy, including market analysis and regulation. And we'll be able to share a lot of the considerations around socioeconomic policies that will help drive a net zero future. Rachel Kite, who's the dean of the Fletcher School at Tufts University, has formerly served as the special representative of the UN Secretary General and the CEO of the Sustainable Energy for All, where she led efforts to promote and finance clean, reliable, and affordable energy, as well as being previously at the World Bank, where she was Group Vice President and Special Envoy for Climate Change, leading to the run-up for the monumental Paris Agreement. And Rachel will be able to help all of us understand the incredible importance of climate equity issues when we think about the net zero transition. We also have Damilola Yuganbi, who is the current CEO of Sustainable Energy for All and the special representative of the UN Secretary General for Sustainable Energy for All and the co-chair of UN Energy, who can help us really go deep into thinking about how we transition our global energy systems and begin to, once and for all, completely decarbonize our global energy grids. And we'll also hear from Dame Julia Slingo, the former chief scientist from the UK Met Office, who is a force of nature in the climate science and next generation climate modeling community. Julia served as the chief scientist for the UK Met Office from 2009 to 2016, when she retired from leading a team of over 500 scientists working on a broad portfolio of climate research. I think that if you are looking to understand the fundamentals of climate science and the way that computer science underpins all of our climate knowledge today, that Julia is the best in the world to help us all understand that. So thank you again. I hope you find, as I said, our keynote speakers both inspirational and educational, and get you thinking about the ways that your research program can contribute to the world's global net zero program. Thank you.